The woman woke before the light reached the valley, cold pressed against the cabin walls like a living thing. It was not sudden. It was patient. It waited through the night, seeped in through wood and stone, and settled into the corners first. She lay still for a moment, listening. Wind moved through the pines above the creek. Snow whispered against the roof. The fire at the hearth breathed low and steady, its last coals dim but alive. Her name was Eliza Ward, and she had learned long ago that waking slowly in the mountains was dangerous. The body stiffened. The cold punished hesitation. She swung her legs from the narrow bed and set her boots on the floor. The planks were hard with frost. She reached for her coat before standing, shrugging into the thick wool with movements practiced enough to waste no heat. Only then did she rise. The cabin was small. One room, log walls darkened by smoke and age, a single window filmed white with ice, a stone fireplace built into the western wall. Everything in the space had been placed with intention, learned through winters that showed no mercy to mistakes. Eliza crossed to the hearth and knelt. She stirred the coals with a poker she had forged herself the previous summer. A breath of orange answered her effort. She added kindling, then a split log she had dried beneath the eaves. Flame climbed. Warmth followed slowly, unevenly. She stood and waited. The warmth reached her face first, then her hands. Her back remained cold. That was the problem. She turned, scanning the cabin's corners. Frost traced the seams where logs met. The far corner opposite the hearth held the cold like a secret. No matter how fiercely she burned wood, that place never softened. Her dog lifted his head from beside the door. A shepherd mix, thick-coated, alert, alive. His tail thumped once against the floor when he saw her watching. "You're warm enough," she said quietly. He was. He always chose his places well. Eliza took a tin cup from the shelf and filled it with water from the covered bucket. She set it on the floor near the hearth, then poured another and carried it to the far corner. She placed it against the wall and crouched beside it for a moment, feeling the air on her cheek. Sharp. Still, she did not sigh. She did not curse. She had learned that frustration wasted energy better spent observing. By the time the light reached the window, the cup near the fire still sloshed. The one in the corner had skinned with ice. She stared at it until the truth settled fully. The cabin did not warm evenly. It never had. Eliza had built the cabin herself 3 years earlier, after the man who taught her trapping died of fever on the plains far east of the range. She had come west alone, driven by the promise of solitude and the necessity of work. She had learned to notch logs, mix clay, set stone, and read weather from the way ravens moved across the sky. She knew cabins, and she knew this one could kill. The thought did not frighten her. It steadied her. She spent the morning checking her trap line along the creek. The ice there never fully held, even in deep winter. She moved carefully, testing each step, her dog ranging ahead and back, always within sight. Traps came up heavy. Mink, marten, good fur. Enough to trade when the snow broke, but her attention kept drifting back to the cabin. She returned before noon and split wood until her arms burned. She fed the fire harder than usual and watched the smoke climb the chimney. It rose straight and fast, pulling heat with it, carrying it away into the white sky. Waste. She watched the stonework around the hearth. It glowed warm near the firebox, then cooled quickly where the stone thinned. That night, she did not sleep near the fire. She moved her bed to the far corner. She did this knowing what would happen. She banked the fire carefully, feeding it thick wood meant to burn slow. She lay down fully clothed, boots on, hat pulled low, dog pressed against her legs. The cold crept in long before morning. It did not rush. It settled. She woke shivering, breath clouding the dark. Her fingers ached. The dog lifted his head and whined softly, confused by her stillness. She sat up at once and crossed the cabin in 3 steps, kneeling at the hearth and breaking the fire back to life. Heat returned. Slowly. She did not blame the cabin. She blamed the design. By morning, the decision had formed completely. This could be fixed. The next days became an exercise in watching. Eliza burned small fires, large ones. She mapped warmth with her hands, moving through the space, noting where the air changed. She placed cups of water in every corner and along the walls. She moved stones near the hearth and watched how long they held heat after the fire dimmed. She learned what she already suspected. The fire heated the air near it. That air rose. It gathered near the ceiling and left through the chimney. The far reaches of the cabin received almost nothing. Wood consumption changed nothing but speed. The mountain did not reward effort without understanding. She rode 2 days south to a small settlement that clung to the river like an afterthought. There were brick buildings there, proper ones, a trading hall built by people who expected to stay. She spent an afternoon sitting near a large masonry hearth, feeling the stone hours after the fire had died. The heat lingered. It moved slowly. It did not abandon the room. An older woman noticed her interest and spoke of her homeland far east, where stoves were built to trap heat rather than throw it away. Eliza listened without interruption. Stone remembered heat. Smoke carried it. Chimneys stole it. Eliza rode home through falling snow with her thoughts ordered and relentless. She began sketching that night. The hearth could not remain on the wall. It needed to move inward. Heat needed mass. It needed time. And it needed to be spread. One chimney was a thief. More than one could be a solution. She spent the next weeks hauling stone from the creek bed, choosing pieces that lay flat and dense. Her dog followed the sledge without complaint, waiting patiently when she rested. Her hands split. Her shoulders hardened. The pile grew. Neighbors passed occasionally, men heading lower before winter sealed the high country. They asked what she was building. She told them. They laughed, not cruelly, not maliciously, but with certainty. "You'll freeze before that works," one said. Eliza nodded and kept hauling stone. By the time winter deepened, she had marked the ground beside her old cabin, a rectangle larger than before, 4 points at the corners, each measured and aligned with care. She dug foundation pits through frozen soil until her arms shook. She laid stone level by level, checking with water and patience. She built pillars where others built nothing. Snow fell. The wind sharpened. Her old cabin remained, just warm enough to survive in while she worked. At the center of the new footprint, she built the firebox. This was the heart. She tested stones in flame and snow, discarding those that cracked. She layered the firebox walls thick, shaping a ceiling that curved just enough to guide smoke without trapping it. From the firebox, she carved channels outward, 4 of them, buried paths of stone, sloping gently, leading to the corner pillars, each channel sealed, each measured, each dependent on the others. She worked in silence, broken only by breath and steel, on stone. By the time the first chimney rose above the snow, the laughter had stopped. People began watching instead. Eliza did not look at them. She laid stone, course by course, rotating her work so mortar could set. She raised logs between the chimneys, pinning wood to stone, making the corners something new entirely. The structure looked wrong to those who passed. That did not concern her. By midwinter, 4 stone columns stood like sentinels, framing a cabin that did not yet exist fully, but already promised something different. On the night she closed the roof and sealed the last chimney collar, she did not sleep. She built a small fire at the center. Smoke hesitated. Then it moved. It split. She stepped outside. 4 thin plumes rose into the frozen night, 1 from each corner. Eliza stood in the snow, breath slow, heart steady. This was only the beginning. Inside, the stones began to warm, and for the first time since she had come to the mountains, the corners of a cabin did not feel like a threat. The first true test came without announcement. The mountains never warned. They simply arrived. 3 nights after Eliza lit the central fire for the first time, the wind changed. It dropped from the north and slid down the ridges like poured iron. Snow followed, not in soft flakes but in needles that hissed against wood and stone. By dawn, the world beyond the cabin had vanished behind a white wall. Eliza woke before the dog stirred. The air felt different. She sat up slowly, waiting for the familiar bite along her back that had haunted every winter she could remember. It did not come. The warmth was not heavy or stifling. It was quiet, even present in places where it had never been before. She stood and crossed the room barefoot. The floor held no frost. She knelt near the far corner where cold once gathered and placed her palm against the stone column rising there. It was warm, not hot, not fading, steady. Eliza closed her eyes for a moment, not in relief, but in calculation. She fed the fire and waited. As the flames strengthened, the stones answered slowly, each chimney waking in its own time. Heat did not rush. It settled. It stayed. By midday, the storm had sealed the valley completely. Snow piled against the walls, filling the space beneath the eaves. Wind pressed against the structure, searching for weakness. Eliza listened. The cabin did not groan. She placed water cups again, not because she doubted, but because proof mattered. One in each corner, one at the center. She checked them each hour. None froze. That night, she slept without boots. The storm did not break the next day, nor the one after that. Snow deepened. Wind carved the drifts into shapes that swallowed the old cabin entirely, burying its roof until only the chimney showed. Eliza let it go. She had already moved what mattered. On the fourth day, someone knocked. It was not a hard sound, just a single, dull thump against the door, followed by nothing. Eliza took her rifle from its pegs and opened the door into a wall of white. A woman stood there, bent forward, one arm braced against the logs. Her coat was rimed with ice. Snow clung to her hair and lashes. She was breathing hard, shallow, each breath a decision. Eliza pulled her inside at once. The dog backed away to make space, tail low, eyes fixed. The woman sagged to her knees as soon as the door closed. Eliza set the rifle aside and crouched beside her, hands already working. She stripped the frozen gloves away and checked the fingers. Pale, stiff, but not lost. Not yet. Sit, Eliza said, voice firm. The woman obeyed. Eliza guided her to the nearest chimney, not the hearth. She had learned that lesson already. Direct heat shocked. Stone healed slower. She fetched a basin, filled it with water, warmed only slightly, and eased the woman's hands into it. She poured hot tea and held it until shaking slowed enough for the woman to drink. Only then did she ask questions. "My name's Ruth," the woman said, voice raw. "My husband's cabin collapsed." Eliza waited. "The roof gave way last night," Ruth continued. "Snow load. He went out to clear it. Didn't come back in time." Eliza did not look toward the door. "Where is he?" she asked. Ruth shook her head. "Buried. I couldn't." Her voice broke once, then steadied again. Grief did not stop the cold. "How far did you walk?" Eliza asked. 4 miles, maybe 5. In this weather, it might as well have been 10. "You live now," Eliza said. It was not comfort. It was instruction. Ruth stayed. The storm pinned them together for 6 days. During that time, Ruth moved through the cabin slowly at first, touching stone, standing in places where warmth should not have been. She slept near the far wall without shivering. She watched the fire burn smaller than any she had known, and still felt safe. "This shouldn't work," she said once. Eliza nodded. "It does." Word spread when the storm finally lifted. Not fast, not loudly, but it moved. Men came first. They stood outside and stared at the 4 chimneys as if counting them again might change the number. They asked questions in half-mocking tones that faded as they stepped inside. They felt the corners. They stopped laughing. One man, gray-bearded and scarred, stayed longer than the others. He stood in the center of the cabin, boots planted, arms crossed. "Fire's not big enough," he said. Eliza added no wood. Minutes passed. The man frowned, then moved toward one chimney, then another. "How much wood you burning?" he asked. "Less than before," she said. He left without another word. 2 weeks later, he returned with stone. Eliza did not help him build. She answered questions when asked. She did not hide anything. Others came. Some failed. Those who rushed cracked stones. Those who misjudged channel slope-filled cabins with smoke. One man built 3 chimneys instead of 4 and learned that symmetry mattered more than pride. Eliza watched and said little. Winter tightened its grip. The record cold arrived without ceremony. Water froze mid-pour. Trees split with sounds like rifle shots. Even seasoned trappers stayed close to whatever heat they could hold. Eliza's cabin burned a steady, modest fire. One night, the wind drove so hard it forced smoke downward through lesser chimneys across the valley. Men woke choking. Fires failed. Eliza's fire held. The channels pulled evenly. The mass absorbed and gave back. Stone did not panic. Another knock came near dawn. This time it was a man half carried by a boy no older than 17 years old, his face raw with fear and effort. Eliza pulled them both inside. The boy collapsed beside the dog, sobbing without sound. The man lived. The boy never forgot the warmth of those stones. By the time the snow finally softened, the laughter was gone entirely. People did not call Eliza clever. They did not praise her. They asked her to teach them. She did. And the mountain, for once, allowed them to keep what they learned. Spring came late and angry. Snow lingered in the shadows long after the sun returned to the valley floor. Meltwater ran cold and fast, chewing at the banks of the creek. The mountains released winter reluctantly, as if offended by survival. Eliza welcomed the thaw for one reason only. Stone could be gathered again. She spent her days hauling from the creek bed, choosing pieces not by size but by sound. She struck each stone lightly with another and listened. A clear note meant density. A dull thud meant weakness. She left those behind. Others watched her work now. They did not interrupt. They did not mock. They stood at a distance and learned without asking. By early summer, 3 new foundations marked the valley. Rough outlines, unfinished ideas, each one different, each one trying to borrow what Eliza had discovered without fully understanding it. She warned them. "Channels must rise," she said. "Not much, but always upward." Some listened. Some did not. The first failure came in late autumn. Smoke poured into a cabin built too quickly, choking the fire, blackening the walls. The builder tore it apart in frustration and left the valley before snow returned. The mountain did not forgive impatience. Eliza's cabin stood unchanged. That winter brought fewer storms, but colder nights. The difference mattered little. The fire burned. The stone held. The corners stayed alive. A man arrived one evening alone, his horse lathered and shaking. He dismounted stiffly and stood staring at the chimneys, as if measuring them against something invisible. "You're the woman," he said. Eliza nodded once. "My wife's expecting," he said. "We won't survive another winter in our place." Eliza looked past him at the sky. "You'll have to start now," she said. He did. They worked through snow. The man learned slowly, but he learned fully. He asked fewer questions than most, and listened longer. When the cabin was finished, he stood inside and smiled once, quietly, as if afraid to disturb the air. That cabin saved 3 lives before the year ended, not because it was warm, because it was even. The valley changed. No one spoke of it directly. There were no meetings, no declarations, but chimneys multiplied. Cabins shifted inward. Hearths moved from walls to centers. Stone piles grew beside creeks like quiet promises. Eliza did not claim ownership. She did not correct the stories that began to drift outward. Some said she had learned the design from old-world builders. Others said grief had driven her to obsession. A few insisted the mountain itself had taught her. Eliza let them talk. What mattered was that fewer people froze. Late one night, she woke to the sound of cracking wood, not from her cabin, from the old one. She stepped outside barefoot, the cold biting but no longer dangerous. The abandoned structure sagged under its final snow load and collapsed inward with a long, tired groan. Eliza watched it fall without regret. It had taught her enough. Years passed. The fur trade thinned. Men left the valley for easier ground, for towns that promised permanence. Some cabins were abandoned. Others were inherited by people who did not know why the stones were where they were, only that they worked. Eliza stayed. She grew slower. Her hands stiffened. Her hair went white long before her strength failed. The dog aged beside her, graying, loyal, warm. One spring, a boy arrived alone, leading a mule. He carried a notebook filled with sketches copied from memory. "I was there," he said, "the night you saved my father." Eliza looked at the drawings. "They're almost right," she said. He smiled. They spent the summer correcting them. When the boy left, he carried more than knowledge. He carried restraint, patience, respect for stone and air. Eliza watched him disappear down the valley and felt something loosen inside her chest. She did not need to follow. The work had already moved on. The last winter she worked the fire herself. She measured nothing. She no longer needed proof. She slept anywhere she wished. The corners held. The stone answered. When spring came, she planted nothing new. She sat outside more, watched snow retreat, listened to water. The valley no longer felt empty. The mountain did not take Eliza Ward quickly. It tested her the way it always had, through endurance rather than force. The winter came gently that year. Snow fell clean and light. The wind stayed high on the ridges. The cold never sharpened into cruelty. Eliza burned less wood than she ever had before, feeding the fire more out of habit than need. Her hands moved slower now. She noticed it in small ways, tying leather thongs, lifting kettles, splitting kindling that once broke easily beneath her axe. She adapted without comment. The dog slept closer to her these days, his muzzle graying, his breathing slower but steady. They shared warmth without thinking about it. One evening, as the light faded early, Eliza sat with her back against the nearest stone column and felt its warmth through her coat. She pressed her palm flat against it and waited. The stone answered as it always had. She thought of the first winter, the frost in the corners, the way cold had waited patiently, ready to claim whatever was careless or tired. She thought of the nights spent hauling stone when no one believed the work mattered. She did not feel pride. She felt satisfaction. When she woke the next morning, the valley was bright with new snow. She stood in the doorway and watched smoke rise from other cabins, now scattered along the creek cabins that bore the same quiet geometry, the same deliberate symmetry. 4 chimneys, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, but always more than one. Eliza smiled once and went back inside. That spring, she taught no one, not because she refused, but because no one asked. They no longer needed to. The knowledge had settled into the valley like seed, passed without ceremony, built without argument. People spoke less of Eliza and more of the warm way, or the balanced hearth. Her name softened into story, then into habit. One afternoon, the boy returned. No longer a boy, taller now, stronger. His notebook was gone. "I built one," he said. Eliza nodded. "Did it work?" He hesitated, then answered honestly. "The second one did." She smiled wider this time. They walked the valley together, slowly. He helped where her strength no longer reached. She corrected nothing unless asked. The mountain had taught them both restraint. When autumn returned, Eliza felt tired in a way that sleep did not mend. She prepared carefully. Firewood stacked higher than usual, water buckets placed within easy reach. The bed moved closer to the center, not because the corners were cold, but because she was. The first snow came early. Eliza did not mind. She spent her final winter as she had spent her best ones, observing, listening, letting the fire burn steady and small. The stone never failed her. The warmth never abandoned her. The dog stayed unharmed and close, curled against her legs, rising only to eat and drink, his loyalty unchanged. When spring came again, the snow melted around the cabin first. Stone remembered. One morning, Eliza did not rise. There was no panic, no struggle, no fear. The fire had burned through the night and gone to coals. The cabin was warm. The dog lay beside her, breathing slow, unharmed, waiting. She was found that afternoon by the boy, now a man, who had come to check the creek. He did not cry loudly. He sat with her for a long time. They buried her when the ground softened, on a rise where the sun lingered longest. The dog lived on, taken in by a nearby family, sleeping always near Stone, always warm. The cabin remained. Years passed. Travelers came through and stayed the night. They noticed the even heat, the way no corner bit back. They slept deeply and left quietly. Some asked who built it. The answers varied, but the stone never did. It held warmth. And because of that, others lived. Epilogue. Long after Eliza Ward's name faded from common use, the valley kept her work alive. Travelers came through without knowing why they slept so well. They arrived stiff and wary, expecting the usual cold that crept from walls and gathered in forgotten corners. Instead, they found cabins that breathed evenly, where warmth did not cling to one place and abandon another. Fires burned smaller than expected. Stone stayed warm long after flames softened to ember. People noticed, even if they did not ask questions. Children grew up in those cabins thinking it was normal that no corner bit their feet at night. They learned to crawl along floors that never glazed with frost. They slept without crowding the hearth. When they became adults and built homes of their own, they repeated what their hands remembered. Stone here, channel there, balance everywhere. No one argued about it anymore. The old cabin near the creek stood longer than most. Its logs darkened. Its roof sagged and was repaired. The chimneys leaned slightly with age but never failed. Moss crept along the lower stones where meltwater lingered each spring. Inside, the air stayed kind. The dog's descendants favored that place. No one trained them to. They simply chose it. Once, many winters later, a woman passing through asked why the cabins in this valley felt different from the others she had known. An old man answered without thinking. Someone didn't accept the cold. That was all he said. When the fur trade vanished and the valley quieted again, the cabins remained useful. Settlers moving west rested there. Later, herders used them as winter shelters. Much later still, people who studied old building methods came and measured the stonework with careful hands. They argued softly among themselves, using new words for old truths: heat distribution, thermal mass, passive design. The stones did not care what they were called. What mattered was that they worked. In time, only one chimney from Eliza's original cabin still stood fully upright. The others had settled, their tops crumbled by weather and years. But even broken, the pattern was clear. Anyone who looked long enough could understand what she had done: balance over force, patience over haste, observation over habit. The mountain, which had once tested her without mercy, kept her work intact longer than it kept most names. On cold nights, when wind slid down from the ridges and snow pressed close, warmth still reached every corner of those cabins. People slept through storms that would have killed their grandparents. They woke alive without knowing why. And somewhere in the quiet stone, the mountain remembered the woman who had refused to accept that cold corners were inevitable, and had taught the land, and those who lived on it, a better way to endure.